Greetings, everyone. Just wanted to send a video out as was promised this past Sunday about General Assembly, just some observations. It's not going to be really a huge deep dive. There's actually other videos that do a pretty good job of that, and if you ask me, I can recommend them. One gentleman I actually met and sat beside named Matthew Everhard. We had a great conversation about Jonathan Edwards and some other things. He put out a video that was 30 minutes long. So there's videos out there, but I wanted to give you my observations, but also wanted to tailor it to our church, because I think as I end this report, it can be encouraging and also kind of a call to faithfulness on our local level as well. So this year was the 2026 General Assembly. We are in the Presbyterian Church in America. We are part of an umbrella organization called NAPARC, which has other churches like the ARP, the OPC, the URC, and it's a bunch of small micro-denominations within kind of like the something called NAPARC, which is a Reformed kind of confederation or we're in relations. That's a better way to put it. We're in relations with other Reformed denominations. We are the biggest one, but Presbyterians were not what we used to be in American history. But encouragingly, we are actually growing. We had 5,000 adult baptisms last year. There are churches that are being planted, and there were some sad things about some churches in our denomination that closed. But through transfer growth and evangelism, church planting, we are seeing a steady growth. In fact, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, they said on average the past like 5-10 years, we've grown about 1.7%. That's not gangbusters, but I'll take that over declining any day. What's leading to that? Well, I'll end on that as a final application. But this year there was a record level of overtures. So you'll say, well, what do I do when I go there? What does a ruling elder do when he goes there? Just in short, you vote on legislation that people send up from the churches and presbyteries. Somebody writes something called an overture. There's other things that we do. It's not limited to this. And somebody writes an overture. It's like, hey, I want to change this in our document, or we want to do that. And if it gets passed in the local presbytery, it gets sent up to the national level, and then we vote on it. That is just one aspect. There's other things that we vote on. People come up for elections. Just in short, it's just the denominational business that we have to vote on. This year, there was a record level of overtures, which, once again, that was legislation that was coming up from different presbyteries in our denomination. There's around 80 of them. That's a lot. The OPC had like 3 this year, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. There's all kind of reasons. Why was there so many this year? There's all kind of speculation. People seeking clarity in our BCO. One guy that I was with was joking but serious. He said with artificial intelligence, that's really helped people write these overtures. So that's why you're seeing more of them. So a guy maybe wouldn't know how to really write an overture, but then he gets to go on ChatGPT or Claudia or whatever, and he punches it in. But regardless, there was 80 overtures. Everybody was thinking we were going to be in there to Friday. There's a professor at RTS Jackson named Guy Prentice Waters, very great theologian, modern living theologian. He got promoted on the committee, and he just grouped them, and we got through business. And the way he grouped it, which has led some to speculate, hey, it was great this year, but could that be used as a potential weapon in the future? Or could it harm the PCA if we just group everything and then cut it all out the floor before we get there? But that's not the purpose of this video, and so who knows with that. More experts on polity will have to debate that. We'll have to see how that works out. Fred Greco was nominated as a stated clerk. I've never met him, but he's a pretty confessional guy. He loves the Bible and the Westminster Confession and wants to hold to the historic Reformed faith. And a clerk is basically somebody that brings in the church business and does a lot of admin stuff, and so that was pretty good. Mel Duncan was nominated as our moderator. what is a moderator? He's not the Pope for a year for us, but he goes around and he speaks and does business and represents the PCA. And Mel Duncan is he's a pretty conservative guy. Other things that happened at PCA is for years now we voted with these little electronic devices, and it was called Clickergate this year because there's so many people in the room that you're voting on these devices and it's not reading them. So you're sending out these little electronic devices and you're waiting for like 7 minutes for like one vote. That's a long time. When I was briefly in the ARP, when I interned and when I was making a stop there before I got here, you actually do a standing count if you can't discern from a yay or nay vote. So that was kind of a lot of consternation and tears and salt and anguish or whatever, salt and ashes. I mean, there were people, yeah. So, we got through the business, obviously, but that was something that stood out. Hot topic issues. One would be directory of worship. They reviewed it. That's going to get pushed back. So many people don't know this, but the Presbyterian Church in America is the only one of those Presbyterian denominations where the directory of worship is not binding. What does that mean? There are principles that are laid out in the BCO of how we should worship God, and it's not binding. So, for example, if you go to OPC or the ARP, you have a place in the BCO where it says you need to do this for worship, and you can. It sets out principles, and it says, okay, so just adapt it, contextualize it, but you need to go off these forms. The PCA just never had it since its inception. And that was due to the history of the PCA, that it was just trying to, when it was breaking off from the main line, it was just trying to keep everybody, all the conservatives who basically held to the Bible, to be in league with each other. So they're going to review that, Directory of Public Worship. How will that affect us? 0%, because we're just sticking to plain vanilla Presbyterian worship. So we don't need to worry about that. And I think it's a good thing. I think we need to, if one thing, the PCA, we need to cinch up the worship a little bit. There are some things that are allowed that is kind of like outside of the bounds, where you're kind of like, I don't know about that. Overture 37 was about allowing women officers. So it'd be the, be the officer of the diaconate. And so that was, there was a guy in Atlanta went up through Presbytery who wanted to allow that option, potentially local option. They all got grouped together and it got sent forward. And it didn't go forward. There's denominations where they have female deacons, and you can have that, but that's been kind of the PCA inception, and we have a history for that. And we just believe that while we won't, and I really do mean this, I don't say this lightheartedly, and this goes up to the women in our church, we want your participation. We want you plugging into the church. Christ relies heavily on, or Christ relies, or shouldn't say that, like Christ relies, that our church relies, that's a better way to put it, that we need, women involvement. We also need male involvement. We need everybody involvement, male and female, right? But we also believe that the Bible teaches clearly that the office is for men. So that got shut down. Going to be no women deacons, no women officers. I think just kind of like thinking out loud about this. It was just kind of a presbytery where we were like a year ago. There was really nothing pushed back or pushed forward. We're just kind of coasting along right now. There's all kind of reasons why that is. So, people who are wanting to send forth legislation saying we need to make it clear in our BCO not to do this or not to do that. One of the arguments against that, I didn't get a chance to vote on it. We just voted on the Overture 37. But one of the other overtures about allowing language in the BCO, one of the reasons why that didn't is because our BCO is already massive, and it's also already clear. So I'm thankful that actually that didn't go forward, because the BCO is clear in what it's clear in what it talks about. What was another thing? So there was that. The Christian Nationalism Study Report. So there's been talks about what's the role of our church and the state, and our denomination has decided to write an overture about that, or a study report. So a study report, just so you know, it's the same thing with the public worship. The study report's non-binding. I'm gonna be crass and very simple. Well, not crass. I'm just very simple. It's some dudes in our denomination that get together and write on a theological topic and say, hey, we think you should share this with the rest of the denomination. It's not binding. So you can go back on the PCA Historical Center and you can see just a bunch of study reports, everything ranging from evolution. There's in the 80s, Douglas Kelly, one of the stalwarts of the PCA, he already wrote something on Christ in the State, but this is just kind of more of a modern commentary on that. That's going to be pushed back to the Christian Nationalism Study Report, is going to be pushed back for another year. And I guess one of the things that people are talking about is how much can you hold to the old Westminster Confession that was where it was more of kind of like a nurturing father aspect, where you have the state kind of promoting the true Christian religion, and then the debate that's just everybody talks about is how much was the American revision, how much was that like the old European revision. So anyway, the study report is going to talk about that, and they're just going to report this to the assembly, and so that's what's up with that. I only mentioned the CN report just because that kind of gets brought up sometimes online. I don't really think it's going to, whatever happens, it's going to have no relevance for us, and I really mean that. We're going to keep going forward. Another thing was the AI study committee. I think this would be interesting. This would be helpful. What is the role of artificial intelligence in the church? Although with artificial intelligence, it's going so fast, it's going to change. But one of the arguments that was put forth was there are biblical principles that you can apply no matter how much AI advances. Like one biblical principle would be like, you should never have an attachment to AI. What do I mean by that? When AI starts to replace the attachment you have with your family, obviously with God, with something else, if you start to see yourself being drawn to AI, where it kind of removes like human detachment, but even more than that, in a much more darker place, if you start like your heart starts getting attached to AI, that's like some very dark territory. That's really happening right now. And I have not been aware of it in our congregation, but one guy who was supporting it said no. He's even had a case in his congregation where he had to pastor someone where they were having an unhealthy attachment to an artificial chat box or artificial intelligence program. So this is AI can be a wonderful tool, but it can, just like anything, it can be bad. So that's what's going on with that. Something called the Danvers Statement, which was affirming biblical womanhood and manhood and complementarianism, gender roles, whatever label you want to put on it, where it's basically saying like a man's a man, female's a female, and stuff like that. There was some pushback against that. It did pass. One of the reasons why it was pushed back is because some of the authors who wrote it about 10 to 15, 20 years ago hold to something called EFS, the EFS view of the Trinity, which it's not just, in short, it's bad views of the Trinity. And so some people are like, hey, we don't want to support this document when they had that view on the Trinity. But then people were saying, well, this was written 20 years ago before any of these authors started holding those views or developing, or maybe they'd had them before. So that's going on with that. So just in closing, I mean, there was a good bit that happened. or in closing with a business, and then I'll close on where I think we're at as a denomination. It was overall a very tame PCA General Assembly. It seems like we're where we were before, and we're just moving forward. We're moving forward, and we're just plugging along as a denomination. Excuse me, the allergies out. Where does that leave us going forward? Only God knows what's happening in our denomination. There have been a lot of ministers, people in the pews, ruling elders, teaching elders, just people holistically who's been praying for our denomination. I have felt that God has been helping our denomination. And other ministers have been talking about how there's been prayer meetings and people praying for our denomination. I hope that this continues. First of all, we need to continue to pray for our denomination, that God would continue to grow us, even if it's small growth. Let's just praise the Lord for that. 5,000 adult baptisms, just taking off on what its profession of the faith is. That's 5,000 people who are saved out of darkness into the light of Jesus Christ, who were saved from everlasting wrath into everlasting communion with the Lord Jesus Christ. That's just adult baptisms. We're not talking about people, so that's evangelism. That's really good. And I think that's something for our denomination, that there was always this, and I really mean this, there was always this Southern evangelical flair to it that really, I think, was really good. And what do I mean by that? It was an emphasis on prayer, revival, and evangelism, along with holding on to the confessions and the spirituality of the church. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we're kind of heading in the right direction, or continuing to go in the right direction, and keeping some of the winds of the world out. There was something called a dinner, and I'm actually part of a Gospel Reformation Network group. That's encouraging. It was an encouraging talk, and it's that their influence has been growing, and so they're confessionalists, which is good. Doesn't mean they have everything right, but it's confessional theology of any variety is better than non-confessional theology. Because our confessions are healthy and good and they're biblical. We want to promote them. So where are we right now in our denomination? You may be asking this, and where are we at right now? It seems like there is a trajectory. We're moving in a direction that is going towards more historic confessional theology. And it seems like denominationally, if somebody was maybe more of a non-confessional viewpoint, they're even seen to move into a more confessional. I think maybe that's part of the winds of the time that we're in, where the foundations have been removed and the revolutionary faith of secularism does what it always does. It fails and leaves just an empty pit of depression and ruins. And so, we're looking out, we're seeing a lot of this. And so I think people are wanting to hold on to something. So, maybe that's some of it. But I don't want to sound triumphalistic. I was talking to some people, and people are like really bullish on the PCA. And I do think there is a good trajectory. But this trajectory has been happening because God's being gracious to us and blessing the PCA, and prayer has been a big part of that. So we need to stay in prayer for our denomination, stay in prayer for our church. And the reason why I brought up the Gospel Reformation Network when I went to one of their talks is John Payne. He's a minister down in South Carolina that's really involved in the GRN, the Gospel Reformation Network. He talked about being faithful in the smallest of things. Be faithful in your life. Be faithful. And over time, small faithful actions, God blesses those small faithful actions. But your job is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and be faithful to Him. And so for our church, we look out and, we look out at a world where it's just like, man, this is crazy. Look at all the opposition. but we should. It's once again a call for us to be faithful in the small things. That Christ is working here in our denomination or in our local church. He's going to continue to work in her. And we need to be faithful in prayer, faithful in the Word, faithful in the sacraments, faithful in laboring to bring the light of Christ to those around us. Because think about it like this. If we were to have an adult baptism here in our area, if somebody were to come to Christ who's never heard of Christ or never really come to Christ, okay, fine, that's just one or two person that's saved. But you add that to our whole denominational efforts. It all adds up. We're on a team here. I'm not out here platforming myself, being going on a rodeo, and it's not all just about us. We're working together with brothers and sisters in our denomination, and also with brothers and sisters in the denominations and various expressions of gospel churches. So I wanted to leave you with that. And if you have any questions about the GA, I know that was just kind of I just kind of put it out. But if you have any questions about our denomination, feel free to approach me at church and I'll talk about it. And, I don't know everything exhaustively that's happening in the PCA. I don't know everything exhaustively about our denomination, but it seems at the very least this was a trending positive General Assembly. And so I think we need to keep praying for our denomination and pray for the Lord to bless it. And, I will say this. I was just about to end, but I'll add this. We might be heading towards persecution. I can't prove that. Or we might be the church corporately might be heading towards rough roads ahead. You're seeing Marxist politicians get elected in different areas of the country. Who knows what's going to happen? There was a minister that I respect. He's not even Reformed. He's Arminian. His name's Jim Cymbala. He's in the Brooklyn Tabernacle. And I was listening to something that he was saying, and he was telling his church, prepare for persecution. He believes it's coming. So, it's encouraging, and maybe this is the moment that we are growing, we are strengthening. Maybe God is preparing his church to go forward in the time that we are called. So I just, once again, let's, for a closing application, let's be faithful. Let's be faithful in the small things. Be faithful laboring for the kingdom of Christ in the vineyard where we're at. And let's give ourselves to prayer. We got to pray, 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 pray. That's all I got for you guys. Please feel free to talk to me about any of this stuff. Blessings.